Hi, and welcome to another episode of Fashion Histories. I'm just going to dive right into this one. I'm going to be talking to you about millinery, which is another word for hat making. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is, like the history of hats, like the social history of hat wearing, and some of the trends. And then I'll talk a little bit about how hats were actually made and their link to a little character in Alice in Wonderland. When I talk about millinery, um, in this episode, I'm going to focus much more on like men's headwear and hats. I will touch on women's headwear and hats. And again, it's going to be very much about like middle to upper class, and it's very Eurocentric and really sort of focused in the UK on this occasion. Um, when we're talking about hats, like why they're important as like part of a social history, is because up until maybe the 1950s, it was it just wasn't okay to leave your house without a hat on. Like we were a hat wearing society, um, and you know if you were seen without a hat like outside of your house, that was not okay. Um, so hats have been a part of people's everyday outfits for hundreds of years. Um, I'm not sure exactly when someone started wearing a hat, but if you think like the purpose of a hat at its very core is to protect your head, um, whether that's from like the cold or if you're outdoors like in a forest, like you know dangerous things, you want to protect your head. But obviously, over time, they become more decorative, more of a representation of your class, your status, your wealth. Um, so that's kind of the area that we're going to look at today. Um, so, as far as women's hats go, um, back in say like I don't know the 1500s, 1600s, women would have taken their cue very much from royalty and whatever was popular at court. So, say if you had a French queen and then a Spanish queen, the kind of headwear that they wore, that they brought with them, was very different. And so, all the styles at court changed to match that, because they didn't want to annoy the queen. But then that trickles down, same as today, like fashions trickle down. Um, and then over time, like you've got figures like Marie Antoinette, who made incredibly big, elaborate hairdos and therefore like accessories for your head. They became really popular, and hats became bigger and more elaborate and made out of like finer materials and things. And yeah, so that's kind of for women. I'll get into why we no longer wear hats or why it's not really part of everyday life for us. I'll get into that towards the end. Um, but that just kind of sets the scene for why hats are really important. So for men, there's some really significant like trends and types of hat that you will still recognise today or have seen, even though people don't wear them. So you've got like the top hat was a really popular style. I think that's around like the late 1700s, going into the 1800s, and obviously that's a very tall hat. It might have been made from like beaver fur. I'm going to get into that in a bit. Or like silk, that kind of thing. So it's very fine, very expensive, and obviously, if you're wearing that, you're not doing anything too practical because it's just going to get knocked off your head straight away. So obviously, this was a hat for like middle to upper class, and it really showed your status, and it literally puts you like head and shoulders above people. So you really like the taller your hat, the taller you are. I don't know. But yeah, very much a status thing. And then another trend becomes really popular is the bowler hat, a lot more practical. And allegedly, this was invented because there was a customer who went to a milliner, and he wanted a hat for his like game warden to be able to wear while he was sort of um, riding his horse around his grounds. Sort of checking the land, sort of, I don't know, preparing for a hunt, that kind of stuff. And he wanted a hat. There wasn't a top hat because that kept getting knocked off by all the branches. And he also wanted something that would therefore protect his game warden's head. Um, so they designed and made this hat that became the bowler hat. Um, it was really close fitting, very sturdy, so it doesn't get knocked off. It protects head. It's basically like a riding helmet without a chin strap. And the customer apparently came to see the product, stamped on it, and when it didn't crumple, he was like, I'll take it. And it just became incredibly popular because obviously people like, people's employees of like fancy grounds and houses were seen wearing it. And so it became maybe less of an upper class piece of headwear, more of like a middle class, which is why I don't know how this happened, but I love that we now associate it with like, it's a very typical British image of a banker with his briefcase, his umbrella, like a pinstripe suit, and a bowler hat. Like, it's such a weird thing. And then obviously, fashions became sort of less formal, a bit more casual, and the trilby was invented that sort of in the 1800s as well, which I can't imagine people wearing trilbies back then, but I suppose you then come into the 1900s. And trilbies are, um, I associate them with like film noir, like private detectives hiding their faces under a trilby. That's what I picture. But they became popular from like the late 1800s. Um, so that's a little bit about some significant trends and styles and the significance of hats. I'm now going to get into like the nitty gritty stuff, like the dark stuff around how hats are made.